Hello everyone, and welcome to Safari Live for this sunrise safari. My name is Scott, and on camera with me this morning I'm teamed up with Brian. So a slight change from yesterday. James is headed out with Jean-Dre this morning, and hopefully they will find something soon. We are on the tracks of a male leopard, and it could be the same male leopard that was seen drinking at the Djuma waterhole last night. Thanks very much for those updates, John and Purple Rain, who informed us that they saw a leopard at around 9 p.m. last night. So he's got a huge head start on us. It's 9 hours later now, or a bit more than that, 9.5 hours later since it was seen. But it could very well be the same leopard we are tracking now. It looks like a big male, possibly Tingana, because Mvula was seen later last night feeding on a zebra that had died in Buffelshoek. We're not sure why the zebra died. It was found bloated and not a scratch on it, so possibly old age or a heart attack, who knows. But Mvula had a small snack on that zebra. That was the last update we got, so it would make sense that it's possibly another big male, and the only other male that would come into this area at the moment would probably be Tingana. So that's interesting stuff, and it ties in with the sighting we had of the Anderson male for the first time yesterday evening. What an awesome moment that was. It was brief, but we did get to see him, and it's believed that here, the Anderson male is putting pressure on Tingana, and Tingana is now putting pressure on Mvula. Mvula being the oldest at around 10 years, Tingana at around 9, and the Anderson male at around 6 or 7. So that's great stuff. And the Anderson male, just to give you a little bit more info on him, was born in Mala Mala, and his mother was the Machipiri female, and his father was a male called Imsagwen, who I believe is no longer around. But in 2011, Imsagwen, the Anderson male's father, was mating with Shadow, a female leopard that we see now, and a female leopard that could well mate with the Anderson male in the future. So interesting stuff there, and thanks very much to all of you who sent through information on the Anderson male for us. It really is appreciated. Shadow was 5 or 6 years old when she was mating with Imsagwen, Anderson's male, Anderson's father rather. And interestingly enough, thanks to Rudolph, who sent me a message and to the north. Good. Hello everybody, hello, welcome to Jiga. It's a marvelous morning here in the Lowveld. Steel grey skies, clouds scudding over the little gaps of blue give it sort of an eerie atmosphere this morning. There's a breeze blowing, a bit of a wind blowing, and it was blowing all night. And I'm sorry for the sudden attachment to this vehicle. I think Scott had a bit of an issue. But here you are, welcome. My name is James. For those of you who are wondering how I've suddenly exploded onto your computer screen. On camera this morning we have Jean-Dre. There we go. He wasn't feeling so well yesterday, but green about the gills, but he seems to be much better today, which is excellent news indeed. You are most welcome. We were extremely blessed yesterday with a day of high action. The Anderson male, a magnificent male leopard by all accounts, the Mvula male leopard, certainly my favorite male of the area, and a lot of yours too. Some magnificent elephants and lots of general game, and a really beautiful evening with some hyena babies. So that was yesterday. Today is another day. And having been so richly blessed yesterday, I'm a little nervous that today we will see one duiker and 2 steenbok. And indeed, we have already seen that one duiker. So I hope we'll find more than just 2 steenbok in the next few hours.
Please remember, love to hear from you. I continue to learn an astonishing amount every game drive from you. Hashtag Safari Live, questions at wildearth.tv. You can send us questions, you can send us comments, you can tell us anything you like. Well, within reason, of course. And that's basically all I have to tell you right now until we find something interesting. The weather is a sort of, you can see I'm not wearing gloves. It's probably about 15 or 16 degrees centigrade, and which is quite warm for the midwinter morning, obviously, but that's because of this moving cloud cover that we have. The issue being that I don't think it's going to warm up a huge amount while it's happening. So, welcome again, and on we go to find the wonders of this wilderness wonderland. Here we go. If you are a first-time viewer, welcome. If you have stumbled across this website by mistake, you're equally welcome. Don't log off and go to your Facebook account. This is much more interesting. You are on a live game drive in the middle of the Kruger National Park, 2.2 million hectares or 3.5 million acres of African wildlife land, and we are going to try and find the little gems and action that this place has to offer, from the little insects to the antelope to some of the carnivores and perhaps some elephants. Right, we're going to go back to Scott. His signal is back and he'll give you an update, and we'll see you just now.
Welcome back, and huge apologies for the break in signal a little bit earlier, but at least you got to say good morning to James. And as we were discussing, it's been really interesting, the leopard dynamics and changes in territories at the moment. So we are certainly very fortunate to be in an area where all this change is happening, because we are in the likely position of hopefully seeing some kind of action and disputes between not only the male leopards but also the lions of the area. There's been quite a lot of movement between territories of the big cats, and we're really looking forward to hoping to share some of that action with you. Now, the Anderson male, like we said, was seen for the first time on Safari Live yesterday, and it would be wonderful if we could find Tingana this morning. It is potentially his tracks who I'm following. That way we would see all three major dominant leopard in our area of operation within 24 hours. Mvula and the Anderson male were both seen on the yesterday's sunset safari, and if we could crack Tingana today, it really would be great. I'm just parked here waiting to listen for any useful audio that may help us find out where these animals could be. And it's interesting to hear while we sit and wait that a lot of the viewers have noticed some interesting differences on the Anderson male that will help us to differentiate him from Tingana and Mvula. One of which is his very pale, almost light blue colored eyes. Another one that I've been told is that there's apparently a U shape quite clearly on his head. So there's a few characteristics already that you, the viewers, have picked up on, and it's going to be wonderful to understand him better over the coming months. He did appear a little bit nervous of our vehicle. Possibly it was because it was the first time he's seen this slightly different shaped vehicle to what he would have been used to. So he could be a little bit nervous. Now, last night we headed out on a drive to get Nikki and Tara out of the control room for a change. So we headed out on a bit of a night drive, and we were just north of the Nkuhuma waterhole when we heard a huge commotion unfolding, and it was actually hippos having a serious fight. We didn't get to see too much of the fighting because it was in quite thick bush, but we did see that one of the hippos was quite badly wounded. He had a series of lacerations on his hind quarters, but one really deep gash between his back legs. So it'll be interesting to see if we see any further sign of that injured hippo. They're very tough and resilient animals, so even though their wounds may look very bad, they can often heal and recover. So that's something to think about. And it'll be also interesting to know if any of you heard that strange audio from the Nkuhuma waterhole cam last night, because it wasn't too far away, although it was quite a windy evening, and that wind was blowing in the wrong direction away from the waterhole, so it may have blown that audio away from the receiver. But interesting also that they were fighting out in the middle of the bush. They weren't even fighting a receding waterhole that, you know, they could have been felt more pressure to fight over because of the lack of space, but they were just out in the open, and maybe it's the lack of food that they're fighting over. So there was a dispute between the hippos. We're not sure if it was dear old Bob from Buffelshoek Dam, but we will certainly keep you updated on any signs of the hippo and what's going on with them. Well, we've been waiting here for a few minutes now, and it's always a tough thing how long to invest in listening as opposed to driving and looking for the animals. But what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to hop out the vehicle here and have a close look for any further tracks. Because it is overcast today, we're not getting the sun casting shadows on the tracks, so it uses flat light that is very difficult to find tracks in. So I'm going to have to get off and search quite closely on foot to see if Tingana has come this way. If it was Tingana, a big male leopard at least. We saw his footprints earlier, and they veered off a road in this general direction. So I'm hoping with a short investigation here we may pick up on where his tracks are. And before I jump off and leave you to watch me tracking, we're going to send you back to James, and hopefully I'll have some great news for you shortly. We'll see you later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Jiga. So, after that extremely hurried and cut and cut back and cut to and cut from, we'll have a slightly more relaxed time this time around. We have come to the eastern boundary, and on the south of the reserve, or south of us, there are some tracks being followed. And those tracks are of two lionesses and their little baby cubs from the Styx Pride. And for those of you who don't know the Styx Pride or the Styx Breakaway, it's all very confusing. There are apparently two Styx Breakaways. This one consists of two lionesses and three cubs of about that big, which is really very sweet. And they're heading north towards here. They haven't crossed the boundary yet, so we're sort of hanging around in that area and just checking that they don't come across, because to spend time with lions like that is a rare privilege. So that's our general plan, modus operandi for the day, or for the morning. I always like to do my sort of morning listening. And while we're listening, Jean-Ray, can you just go up towards that nest there? Always important to sit and listen and see if you can't hear alarm calls or bird calls that might give away the presence of other animals. So we're just going to have a listen for 10 seconds, and then I'll tell you about that nest. So you can hear mainly just francolins making a huge noise off doing their morning calls. Subtle winter dawn chorus that we get here with a sort of slightly ominous undertone of the scudding clouds going across the sky. In that nest there is something called a red-billed buffalo weaver's nest, and that's sort of like an apartment block. I don't think there are any red-billed buffalo weavers in it right now, but it's like a little apartment block where they all live. The couples sort of set up shop in individual little chambers, and they have their babies there, and then they go out foraging together. It's quite a nice little communal setup. It's quite a nice little communal setup that they've got. Always, as you noticed on this tree, on the northwestern side, like I have been on many occasions, unfortunately. Then that nest is a pretty good way of getting your directions. Facing northwest, it's not totally infallible, but it's a pretty good indicator, because the sun at this time of the year, for example, when it's cold, the sun is basically northwest, and so that provides warmth in the last dying embers of the day. And then in the heat of the summer, the sun moves quite a long way to the south, and so it would come from the southeast, and so perhaps that's quite a nice shady spot to be in the summer, especially when the little ones are in the nest just after breeding. So it's quite a nice way to find your way, especially on a day like this, on a cloudy day like this, when you can't see the sky or the sun. If you're not familiar with an area, it's astonishing how easy it is to get lost, because there's very little obvious topography in an area like this. No mountains, no rocky outcrops that you can see from just about anywhere. And so it's pretty difficult on a day like this to find your way around if you don't know the roads. Luckily now I've become quite familiar with the roads, and so it's not particularly difficult at the moment. Red-billed buffalo weaver. Right, on we go. I hear no alarmed animals yelling, no squirrels chirruping away in terror, and no francolins shouting in objection at the sight of a predator. I'm just going to go back a second. I told you a lie the other afternoon, entirely unintentionally, but I did tell you a lie, so I must come clean. You don't need to film me, John. I'll just pick a piece. There is a tree here. I'm going to make a terrible confession right now. This tree, I told you 2 days ago, for some of you who were there during the afternoon game drive, that this was a tree called Rus Gwenzii. Right, I'm going to put it here for you so you can have a decent look at it. And I told you Rus Gwenzii was a spiky thing, and the spikes give you a bit of, they'll irritate your skin if you're chopping it. As I put it on the dashboard there, thankfully into the glare of the setting sun, I realized that I had misidentified it, but I had gone too far down the road to make a confession at that stage. This is not a Rus Gwenzii, it's a very similar looking species, and what made me realize is that, and Gendre, I'm going to give you a piece here so that you can tell me what you think. Just squash it up there and have a smell of it. It's got a really lovely kind of, what do you smell, Gendre, before I say anything?
Medicinal?
Sort of medicinal, citrusy type smell. You get any citrus on it? And I think it's something called Vepris reflexa, not Rus Gwenzii. That's not a massively interesting thing, but I did need to come clean. I've had 2 sleepless nights over the fact that I told you the wrong thing about a tree. So I think that's what it is, but I'm going to take a piece and take it home and see just for sure what it might be. Lovely smell to it. Right, here we go. Now with that off my chest, I feel free. Just plug myself in again so that I may hear the sultry tones of Tara Dales and the final control. Sorry, Gendre, I'm going to have to go back again. Right, now, Gendre, can you just go over here? While I tend to like to do a few quiet things in the morning like this, just so that we can hear what's going on. I'm just going to show you a piece of dung. And I must just reiterate, if you're a young viewer at home, or even if you're an adult and perhaps have a slightly more child, don't go picking up dung in the bush and then not washing your hands, because it's not particularly hygienic. But this is pretty old. Now this, as I can see, is zebra dung, and you can tell that from the fact that it's entirely made of grass, and it's not nearly as finely eaten up as something like a ruminant would eat it up. So if you get a piece of impala dung or buffalo dung, and that's really far more finely chewed than this piece of zebra dung. And the reason I've picked this here is that when I first saw it, I thought it was going to be warthog dung. Warthogs produce dung that looks almost exactly the same as zebra dung at first sight. But because the zebra's bottom is at a greater height, it tends to fall in a more manner than it does from a warthog. So that's quite a nice way of being able to tell the difference between the two. Oops. I've just dropped some into the car. Oh well. Bjorn will be upset when he takes his vacuum cleaner to it. Righty-ho. On we go. Right, I have two punishments for my lie. It wasn't really a lie, you know. It was just more a sort of light fib. Georgianne says I must sing something now. Ex-ranger in Tasmania says that I need to eat some dung. I'm going to go with the former. I think we'll have a brief song. I've just got to think about what song it's going to be. Where? There's a bird over there. We've got a bird there. And while we look at it, I'm just going to answer a question for Chris Rowe Cropper. Chris, you want to know exactly where that zebra is. I'm not sure how. You're probably quite familiar with the map, given your familiarity with what we do here. So there's a road called Gowrie Main that junctions with our northern boundary, and the dead zebra, oh, beautiful, look at that. It's not a batelier, you know. I don't know what that is. Beautiful. Huge, eh? It wasn't. It may have been a large brown snake eagle. Anyway, Chris Rogue. So just about 100 meters north of the boundary, on the northern boundary at the junction with Gowrie Cut Line, and there were some predators there. Apparently there were some hyenas. Mvula did make a slight dent on the carcass, but a very small one. And then some hyenas went there, and I know there are some guys looking at it now, but there are no lions there. There are still lions around the buffalo kill that the Nkuhuma Pride made. They came back there last night, and they were chased off by that Styx male again, and the 5 Birmingham males apparently were seen somewhere around Buffelshoek as well. So for those of you who don't know, this is all sort of north of the reserve that we're on now. We're on a little piece called Juma, and we're on the southern end of that. And then nice question from, just hear that bird's calling again. A nice question about colic. Now, for those of you who don't know, colic is a stomach issue that horses get quite a lot of, and it's a fairly major killer in domestic horses. It's a thing that you've got to watch out for the most. And if they get colic, which is a sort of bad stomach ache, if you like, they will roll and often twist the gut and that twisting of the gut will result in death pretty quickly. So I've seen many horses treated. Hello everybody, welcome back to Giga. Quite against what we predicted. We did see our 2 Steenbok, and Jeandre and I were about to go home for bacon and eggs. And then this beautiful kudu popped out of the woodwork, so to speak, and she's looking down somewhere at what I don't know. She certainly hasn't made any loud alarm calling noises, so that's good. Well, not good for us, good for her, I suppose. And she's just feeding gently. We're just going to move out the way. We are, in fact, in the way of another vehicle. Hold on a second. You still get a shot there? No, really. Nongo.
Nongo.
How's it going?
How are you?
Good, fine. Just a kudu.
No, that's not. Did you copy about the leopard?
No.
Right here.
Is it still there?
Vehicle.
Is it still there?
It's right here, yeah, the Tatum or no.
Okay, I'll do that. Super. Good news, everybody. Leopard. We'll just find out about it. Stand by. Thank you very much. Morne, come in, Morne. Station controlling shadow sighting. I'm just going to see if we can get in here. I can't get hold of them on the radio. I think there's only one vehicle there. I think we're going to just pull in and see what we can find. This is extremely exciting. There it is. It's little Sindile. Isn't that wonderful? Morne, do you copy Morne? Sorry, I just need to quickly get hold of him to make sure that we are allowed to come into the sighting. I think we are. Rather marvellous news. So that's little Sindile, Shadow's cub. Just 10 months old. Is that all right, Jeandre? I'm just going to go a little bit forward. Good morning, Morne. What? Go. Now let me move. What channel are you on? Just going to get out of the way here, and then we will enjoy little Sindile. Is anyone else coming?
No.
Cool.
Just a deal, but it's way out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. See ya. Everybody, we have him all to ourselves. Isn't that spectacular? No one else is coming here. Is this who I think it is? It looks like Sindile, but it looks a bit small. That's just so special. So now, for those of you who don't know, Shadow is the resident female of this sort of area where we are, and I think this is her young cub, Sindile, so named by the Twitterati, who have spent so much time enjoying his growth from cub to 10 months, which he is now. He's a very sweet little fellow. And he's always, you know, despite he's quite close to this road just about all the time, but because it's such a busy road, you never see his tracks. So it's just such a wonder to be able to see him like this without any noise and anyone else around. Hello, Edward. A really nice question. You say, is there any time of year that leopards would be most likely to change their territories? What's he looking at? We've seen this last week. Edward, nice question. It's got nothing to do with time of year, Edward. I think it's got almost entirely to do with the pressure that these leopards feel, mainly from other leopards. And certainly he's spotted something that he thinks is quite interesting. Edward, I will get back to your question. Sweet he is. Oh, he's a magnificent animal. This. Turn around quickly. Jean-André, stand by. Now running across the road. There he is. He spotted something that he thinks is quite interesting. I don't want to get too close. We're just going to stop here. Stand slightly so we can get a better view. And then we'll just wait here and see what he does. So I don't want to disturb him if he's managed to find something to perhaps attract his attentions. So, Edward, we had a fascinating talk the other day by a resident leopard expert, and he used the term home range. He didn't use the term territory, and that's quite interesting. And what it indicates is that they're actually a lot more fluid about what they do. Stalking something. Oh, look at that beautiful stalking behavior. Sorry, Jean-André, I'll stop right here. There's an impala there. Okay, stop here. There is an impala, but that's not what he's looking at. There's an impala way up the road. There's something moving in there. It's the kudu. There's a kudu in there, and this is classic young male leopard behavior. I've seen them stalking rhino before. There is also an impala in there, but he's looking directly at a kudu. And they so often will do something silly, like stalk an enormous animal, and they really have no chance of killing at all. Looks like the same kudu we were looking at. And the kudu's now looking at us, wondering why we've stopped. The leopard is looking at the kudu. So, Edward, while we wait for Sindile to make his move, if he is indeed going to do that, I think leopard territories are more fluid than we thought they were. And certainly, I think it's almost entirely to do, well, there are two factors that will make them move. And one is pressure from other leopards, and the other is prey availability. Now, the prey availability in this area doesn't change hugely. So I think that the fact that Karula's been spending so much time further to the east is probably largely to do with the fact that she's feeling pressure from other leopards. But she does have a huge territory, so she will sometimes spend time, different amounts of time in different parts of the territory. Hello, Dee. Dee, you ask an interesting question. How long, and it's one that comes up quite often and one that's difficult to answer. Dee, you want to know how long will Shadow leave her cub? So if you perhaps are a new viewer, Shadow is the mother of this 9-year-old leopard who has so far failed to raise a cub to independence. Now, that's not necessarily an indictment on her, although it probably is. Only 35% of leopards will make it to adulthood in this area. But I would imagine she'd leave him for up to 2 days. Leopard this age will start killing for himself, just small things. I mean, that kudu is going to laugh at him if it comes running at him. But So he'll be killing little francolins and bits and pieces like that on his own. I would say normally 2 days would be an outside maximum. Given her astonishingly poor record thus far, though, Shadow may well spend a bit longer away from Sindile than, say, Karula might. So there are some impala around. That adult male impala is also much too big for Sindile to kill. He might try it, but I don't think he will. He's still quite a little fellow. But you can just see the typical young male leopard behavior. I've never seen young females do what he's doing now. They tend to be much more sensible. Hello, Marianne in Boston. You want to know when Shadow was last seen? As far as I know, she was seen this morning, actually, in Arathusa. Very briefly, somebody saw her sort of nipping past a road. And that from here is about, say, 1 kilometer to the west. And Shadow tends to hang around this area quite a lot. We see her tracks quite a lot, but she's often in an area of pretty thick bush. That's a male impala chasing a female. Complete waste of time this time of year. And totally oblivious to little Sindile lying here watching in astonishment. So Marianne, and then Scott had Shadow not far from here. When was that? I think it was on Sunday morning, if I'm not mistaken. So 2 days ago. And then we had him about, he was probably 1 kilometer from here as well on Sunday evening. So they both are in and around this area quite a lot. And I suspect she comes back more often than we see her coming back. Remember this main road here that we're on, that you've seen, we're actually at the confluence of 2 main roads. And because of the amount of traffic, there they've spotted him. They've seen him. Look how dejected he looks. See him looking shamefacedly to the left. Now, that's incredible that they've spotted him from there. I promise you, if you were a human being walking where those impala are now, you wouldn't see him at all. That's what that snorting is. That's their alarm calling. So, I'm not sure if there might be, I'm pretty sure there's no other predator in there. I think that they've seen him. And he's certainly looking a lot more shameful than he was. I'm just going to reposition slightly and see if we can't get a slightly better view. Jean-Ray, where would work for you? Should we try and go around here a bit? We'll give him some cover from the impala. Now sorry, Jean-Ray, let's stop here briefly. Now you can hardly see him. If you can just go towards the bush there. And let's not zoom in, let's stay there. That is the view that the impala have, but from a further from a distance of what? How far away would you say that? About 100 meters? About 100 meters, that's the view they have. Now, I can't see a leopard in there. I could just see his flickering tail. Those impala are incredibly sharp. Isn't that amazing? And I don't think it's got anything to do with smell. I'm 90% sure they saw him. He was sitting up slightly, but I'm pretty sure they saw him. Does that work for you? Good. Got beautifully camouflaged deers. Teresa, you say this is the second time you've seen him hanging around by a road, and you want to know if perhaps there isn't some reason for this. If there's some reason he's hanging around a road. Teresa, I think it's simply the fact that his mother's territory is in and around this area. I don't think that the road affords him any particular advantage. Certainly not in the way of hunting. Well, except that, you know, on the sides of the roads there are these fire breaks which are a bit clearer. You know, they're a bit clearer of bush, so it may be slightly easier to hunt in. I think he's just staying where he's been told to stay by his mum. But she does tend to centre on this area as well. This road that we're on tends to be the exact boundary, or certainly used to be the exact boundary between Karula and Shadow's territories. And Shadow has been seen doing little forays to the west of the boundary, east of the boundary of late. Then a question about whether the cub will have a home range. The cub won't have a home range, no. The cub will basically stay within an area that probably within sort of 100-meter radius of where the mother leaves it. They will wander as they get older, like old Sindile is here. As they get older, they will wander a bit more widely, but I would say within a 100-meter radius of where the females are. And they'll only, then as they get older, that radius will get larger and larger until they start making decent-sized kills of their own, and then they'll almost become nomads until they're large enough to try and take a territory. Jean-Andre, positioning?
A bit closer.
Can probably try and get a little bit closer, but I don't think he seems to be about to go to sleep. Going to stop here. Is that right? So I'm going to try a little bit back. We are quite close to him. How's that? Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to speak quite quietly now because we are very close and I don't want to frighten him. This is just such a privilege to spend this time. Cheryl, you've spotted some little purple flowers there in front of him. And they're the last of the sort of wild flowers of the area. And I think what they are is something called Vernonia oligocephala. They don't seem to have a common name. And that's pretty much what I think they are. Brent and I are in a slight disagreement that we won't be able to sort out until we can sort of see them in their full summer flush as to whether that is in fact a dwarf wild sage or a Vernonia, and I think it's a Vernonia. So it's either a dwarf wild sage or a Vernonia oligocephala. Now we are only about 6 feet from him, and he's just turned into such a confiding little fellow. It's so lovely that he's so comfortable with us. That rather delightfully sort of fluffy fur of his does make me want to get out of the car. It does make me want to get out of the car. So Dee, you want to know what his chances are and what the issues are with his survival. Dee, his survival will depend very largely on his mother's ability to feed him. In terms of predators, yes, he'll definitely have to watch out for hyena. But you know, if he's awake and aware, which I think he will be, a hyena will struggle to get hold of him. He's much faster than a hyena, and he'll rush up a tree if a hyena comes anywhere near him, or just disappear into the undergrowth and eventually climb a tree. He's much quicker than a hyena. His major predatory worry at this age, at age 10, at 10 months, is lions. Lions are fast and they are vicious, and there are often more than one of them at a time. So he will have to be very careful of lions, mainly. When they're younger, anything will get hold of them. Lions, wild dogs, hyenas. But what is very interesting to me is that for cubs, the major source of death is infanticide. So that means a territorial male who does not recognize the cub or does not believe it to be his will come in and kill the cubs. And it's actually a far more prevalent phenomenon in just about all mammal life than it is than we think it is, and leopards are no different. Hello, Jake and Kylene. Very nice question here. How long will leopards live in captivity versus how long will they live in the wild? Well, Jake and Kylene, in this area, we have the oldest recorded female leopard was 17 and a half years, although I did have anecdotal evidence from somebody the other day that there was an 18-year-old leopard in the area. And the data on the Sabi Sands leopards is pretty good, so let's call it 18 in the wild, and that's very old. The oldest male on record in this area is 14 and a half. He's still alive now, but looking very ropey indeed. Now, in captivity, they'll live at least 20 years. So the rough lives that they have, especially the females, they'll live 20 years in captivity. The rough lives that they have here definitely make a huge difference to their, to their longevity. So the stresses and strains of life in the wild tends to make a huge difference. He really looks like a pretty cuddly fellow, doesn't he? It'd be quite nice to just go and snuggle up next to him on this chilly morning. So, some nice questions about leopard hunting from Elizabeth and Debbie. I'll just answer them, and then we're going to reposition slightly. Elizabeth and Debbie, leopards do not learn to hunt from their mothers. They learn it on their own. It's amazing. Their cheetah will, their mothers teach them. They spend a great deal of time teaching them to hunt. But a leopard, that isn't the case. With a leopard, what happens is that they just learn to do it on their own. They learn to do it on their own, and from young age, they'll catch little mice, lizards, termites even, and from termites they'll eventually, to get on to the second question, they will eventually learn to take things like impala. Now, could this leopard take a young baby impala? Newly born, absolutely, but he's not big yet, and he's pretty inexperienced. So he might be able to take, say, a 3 or 4 month old impala lamb that is about Dyker sized. He might be able to do that. But it's just so interesting how they, just like a house cat, no one trains your house cat how to catch a bird or how to chase wool or play with things, and it's exactly the same with a leopard. They learn very little from their mothers. Hello, Anne in Durban and Lisa on Twitter. I'll get to your question right now. Let me see. Nice questions. you want to know, Anne, you think that your question is a bit anthropomorphic. I don't think it is. I think it's absolutely valid. Will he be just waiting for his mum, just sort of sitting around waiting for his mother? Basically, absolutely, that's what he's doing. He'll eat if he can. If some form of food pitches up for him to jump on and eat, then that's exactly what he will do. He'll eat it, but otherwise he's waiting for his mum to take him to a kill, or he's finished suckling now, or come and just say hi. And it's interesting to note that he's on his own. He doesn't have a sibling to play with. And leopards that are born in twins, definitely they would be doing a lot more sort of general horsing about and play behavior. So I'm sure that must make a difference to their characters as they grow up. Then another question. So, I mean, he will definitely find things on his own to eat. He won't starve to death without her. In fact, if you look at his belly is actually relatively full. So I suspect he's probably smacked a scrub hare during the night, or found a Franklin knocking about the place. His belly looks pretty full. He's not skinny by any stretch. Look at his coat, eh? Hello, Rather and Dodie. You want to know if if there's a tree large enough for him to climb up into, should he be threatened. I'm laughing because I've seen them hanging in the most ridiculous little sort of spindly trees, almost the tree bending over to whatever they're trying to get away from. But Rather and Dodie, there are a few trees around here. It doesn't have to be a particularly big tree for him to get away from a hyena. And they're such adept climbers that, he can climb up a pretty scraggly little tree and get away from something. But there are some pretty good-sized ones around here. I'm just going to try and slightly reposition. Don't go anywhere. We are not going to go anywhere. Like so. Jean's a bit of a taskmaster as a cameraman. You've got to just keep him happy. That 3-inch move has now got him smiling from ear to ear. Minjan ba? Yuko, Fuki. There seems to be an inordinate amount of a fascination with the blue flowers in front of him that he's now looking at. Well, he's actually looking at me through the blue flowers, and they're purplish flowers. Christy, your name has popped up. I will tell you what they are. They look to me like something called Vernonia oligocephora, which doesn't have a common name. Brentley Smith and I are in high disagreement. He says that they are dwarf wild sage. I think he's talking utter nonsense. I may be proved wrong at some stage, however, but we're going to wait for them to come into decent bloom in the summer when we can get a proper look at the leaves before we can tell. So, Christy, as far as I'm concerned, that is Vernonia oligocephora. I don't think they match very well with his coat. Hello, D. Phillips on Twitter. You want to know how many cubs are normally born to a leopard? not very simple question. You know, you read all sorts of funny, fangled things. Basically the range is from 1 up to, I think, 6 is the maximum ever recorded, but 6 they will never survive. So they definitely don't survive. The most I've seen is 3, and also they will struggle to survive. The optimum number for her to look after is 2. That seems to be the sort of almost the limit at what they're able to look after. But there are a few examples of litters of 3 cubs being raised quite successfully. And one of the best experiences I ever had actually with a leopard was just down the road. That starling has just spotted the leopard. I had a wonderful experience just down the road at a place called Londolozi. I was on game drive. I'm not sure how many of you know the great game of rugby union, but on the vehicle his delightful fiancée, and we were driving along and we stopped at a rocky outcrop just to have a look-see, and out popped 3 tiny little baby leopards and their mother, which no one had ever seen before. And it was just such a privilege. We were the first human beings to see them. They came out of the cave with their little faces all screwed up, and I mean, they're almost black. Their spots are so close together. It was the most wonderful experience. And she managed to raise 3 of them almost to maturity, and I think she then lost 1. Dara in Ohio, nice question. You want to know basically what will happen, how will he know when to leave his mum? Answer is the same way that humans know. Their mothers tell them to pack their bags and head on out, basically, is what will happen. She will just stop coming back to him, and he will start, it doesn't happen suddenly. So Ramey, this dovetails into your question. They basically just start ranging more widely as they get more confidence, and as their mothers start bringing them less food, so they will start to range, and eventually one day, instead of becoming, so a lot of you watched Quarantine and Nkuhuma, who are 2 young male leopards. They're now, I think they're 2.5 years old now. They were raised in and around this area by Karula, another female leopard, the grandmother of this one we're looking at now. And they ranged around here for a long time within their mother's territory, and then suddenly they became nomads. And all that means is that they start to range far more widely. They get confident enough to live outside of their mother's territory, and that's what will happen. But he should still be around. Look, this is assuming he survives. He will still be around for the next year or so. Hello, Elizabeth in Minneapolis. A very nice question. I'm sounding a little surprised because I'm trying to think if I've seen what you've described. You say you've heard or read that a single male will stay with the mother longer than, say, if they were in a pair. Yes, I would say that. I'm just trying to think. I have seen a number of litters raised with 2 young males, often with 2 young males. I haven't noticed a huge difference, but I imagine what will happen is that those two brothers, they often will, they don't quite form a coalition like cheetah will, but they certainly form a little bond that probably helps them to become independent sooner than a young male like this. So yes, quite possibly, Elizabeth, if they are in pairs, they will leave the mum's territory a little sooner. Sorry, I think there's someone trying to get hold of me on the radio. So I think that there are lots of people who would have been able to drive in and past and round this leopard without ever having seen him. And the distressing thing about it is that when we're driving through the bush, saying that we haven't found anything, it's really something of we're probably talking rubbish. We probably drive past these things so often. Anyway, we're going to go across to Scott quickly and see he's tracking and get an update from him, and we'll come back here just now to have a look at little Sindile and how his morning is progressing. See you just now.
Well, hello everyone and welcome back. As you can see, I'm out the vehicle and there's a host of different predator tracks in this area. We're in the northeastern corner of the property, close to Buffelshoek Dam, and we've had tracks of, in all likelihood, the Nkuhuma Pride in this area and also of a leopard. So I'm just going to take a quick moment to check some tracks up ahead here. Now, there's something certainly happening in this area now. I've just seen tracks of what looks to be a young male leopard, possibly Nkuhuma or Quarantine, heading up this road towards us. We were driving down this road because we had female leopard tracks coming in this direction. So there must be a leopard here somewhere. It's just quite tricky. The bush is very thick and it's hard to drive through the bush in order to look for them. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a big loop around the block and see if we don't come up with anything. I think Texan and Ephraim are also on their way to help us, as they've been searching for the Nkuhuma Pride up in Buffelshoek and haven't had any luck, and that's because they're here on Juma in all likelihood. It's just a matter of finding them now. Well, we're certainly in a great spot and happy to hear you've been enjoying a wonderful morning with James and Sindile. And well done to James for getting you into that wonderful sighting. It's all crisp and cool, and I've just been chatting with Brian saying why I prefer the cooler winter months, and it's because there's no major rush to find animals. Even if we were to, at 9 o'clock, stumble upon lion or leopard, there's still a strong chance they'd be active. Whereas in the summer months, you almost limited to that first hour of sunlight to find animals on the move, especially the predators, who will take it easy when it starts to heat up and it gets really hot and humid in our summer months. Okay, Mike from Florida would like to know, what do I think is the most exciting big cat scene you could wish to see? And that's a tricky one, Mike, but a good question nonetheless. I would be almost tempted to say a fight between either a pride of two different lions, or a coalition of different lions. So the difference in that is that you can get fights between two male coalitions or fights between two female prides. So any of those clashes would be incredible to see. Also clashes between leopard, again, male against male and female against female. It's something that I have yet to see. I've seen a few very half-hearted lion fights, nothing too serious, or we got there too late. And I've never seen leopards having a full-blown fight. So that would be something really spectacular to witness and exciting. And again, probably lion hunting buffalo is one of the most exciting hunts you could see. So those are a few of the more exciting scenarios that I would wish to see. And out of African animals, thinking of other big cats around the world, just to see a tiger for me would be an incredibly exciting opportunity, even if it was sleeping. So it depends on who you are, I guess. Good question though, and what I can tell you, the only thing I can guarantee you is that if you want to see good action out here on safari, you have to invest time. I've spent many years doing this, day in and day out, and have still yet to see many things, but as long as we are out here for these 2-3 hour broadcasts a day, we are increasing the likelihood of us possibly catching an incredible scenario unfolding. So basically don't go anywhere, because anything could happen at any stage. Well, Kevin in Boston, hello and welcome on board. Kevin's noticed that it's exceptionally dry, and you're right, Kevin, and it will continue to dry out for the months of July, August and September. In October we could potentially start getting rain, but more likely in November, and there are chances of big fires breaking out from September and October, as we can often have electrical storms that pass over and unleash huge bolts of lightning, but with no moisture to go with it. And these bolts of lightning will strike down onto a dead tree, like this dead leadwood tree on my right, or possibly some of the other dead trees, the knobthorn trees or marula trees, set fire to them, and then fire rages through the Sabi Sands bushveld. In my first year in the Sabi Sands, there were an abnormally high amounts of fires, and on one night, just from one electrical storm that passed by, there were 3 different fires of massive size that were dotted over the various parts of the Sabi Sands, and it makes for some extremely adrenaline pumped firefights, because you're often moving through this bush which is full of dangerous game. These fires that we were fighting were at night, so you're in the dark, only using the flames from the fire and your torch, trying to beat the fires to control or set back burns to prevent the fire from raging too far. So it's something that all the guides will get involved in, all the lodges will team together and respond to radio calls whoever needs the most help. Obviously there's a lot of infrastructure here that can go up in seconds, so we all try and band together and prevent any lodges getting burnt down. Occasionally they do, but thankfully we've got quite a well-oiled firefighting protocol amongst all the lodges here, and when everyone joins together and works as a team, we can usually stop the fires without causing damage to the lodges, but certainly causing damage to the environment. But it's a natural occurrence. It's needed to help clear out all the dead vegetation that accumulates over the years and make space for new growth. So it is necessary, but not too often. Jan from Philly, also on the subject of all this dry vegetation, would like to know if the grazers are able to feed on these dry grasses, and they certainly are, Jan. It's their only option. Sadly, there's no lush green grass around at the moment, so if they couldn't feed on this dry grass, well, then they would be in a very tricky scenario. you'll find they have to move around and be a little bit more selective in what they feed on, but this is certainly their only option. Well, I'm sure you're all wondering what Sindile is up to, and I don't want to keep you away from that beautiful young leopard too long, so we're going to send you back to James, and we'll catch up with you all a little bit later.
Hello everybody, welcome back. We're just moving the vehicle around a bit. He has kind of disappeared slightly just as you were coming back towards us. And we're just going to have a look. He is just in here, and we obviously can't drive off road there because that's not our part of the reserve, but we can certainly look at him. There he is. Andre, let's just get a look there. Come on. So he just moved a little bit into this reserve, and look how beautifully hidden he is. It's absolutely astonishing. Hundreds of cars will drive past him today and not see anything at all. Andre, I think that's possibly the best shot we're going to get, I'm afraid, for now. His lovely eye. Hello, Brenda from Virginia. I've just seen one of your fellow countrymen from West Virginia. She's just been on a game drive looking at Sindile with us. So, most welcome. You want to know, does he sleep in a tree at night, or will he sleep on the ground? Brenda, leopards don't necessarily like to sleep in trees. They're not very comfortable places. So if he can, he will sleep on the ground. But remember, they're nocturnal, so most of his sleeping will be done now during the day. And they don't sleep particularly heavily. So while they put their heads down and they'll shut their eyes for a little while, then they'll look up, and then they'll put their heads down again, and then maybe a minute later they look up again, and then they put their heads down. They're not like lions. Even lions will periodically stick their heads up and have a look. Nothing out here can afford to sleep like the dead, like we do. When we go to bed at night, some of us, you could have a large bomb go off next to you and you wouldn't wake up. I'm certainly one of those people. And these cats are nothing like that. So when we say sleep, they don't go into the deep sleep that we do. And most of the sleep will be done during the day. So Brenda, unless there is some imminent danger, he will not choose to be in a tree to rest. It's just simply not comfortable. Sometimes they look very comfortable, but we had a great example the other day of watching Karula, his grandmother, and she had a kill up in a tree, and it looked like a perfect place. There was a horizontal bough for her to rest her body on. She had all four legs swung down on either side. But eventually she became uncomfortable, and she came down the tree and lay on the ground underneath the kill. So that's more sort of typical behavior. I wonder if you drove past here, or if you walked past here, if you'd see that leopard where he is now. I can't even see him in the picture. Just see him. We had a very interesting question the other day about camouflage, and I was talking about how waterbuck are so perfectly camouflaged for this type of bush, this color of bush, this dark this sort of winter gray that tends to cover the bush. And somebody said to me, yeah, but what happens when it's green? And the answer, of course, is that when it's green, the bush is much thicker, and so the need for camouflage is reduced. So I think that that leopard is perfectly colored for a time when the vegetation is low, and it's this kind of color where slinking away into thick bush is a bit more difficult than it is, say, in the summertime when everything is totally green. And if you just joined us now and you haven't seen this place in summer, if we were to take you forward, say 6 months or back 6 months, you wouldn't recognize this landscape. What is a sort of golden browny gray now, which I find very attractive, turns into a totally verdant kind of green wonderland in the summertime. And camouflage becomes much less important then, because you're able to hide rather than walk undetected, if you know what I mean. Helen in Arkansas, an interesting question. You want to know, do I ever feel bad leaving a sighting? I think what you're getting at is, wouldn't I like to hang around and make sure that the animal is safe? Ellen, there are definitely times when I feel like that, and there are times when, contrary to all known and good practice, I have in fact, or certainly friends of mine have intervened. So, for example, if I knew that there was a lioness stalking a friend, let me tell you a story. And just down the road from here, there's a preserve called Londolozi. There's a fellow called Renius Mhlongo. Now, Renius Mhlongo is possibly the best tracker that South Africa's ever produced, and he will find just about anything. And on initially meeting him, I mean, he's a tremendously gregarious, wonderful person. But he's not a sort of, what should we say, he's not nostalgic. But one day he was watching a leopard like this, about this age, on his own, without the mother, and they spotted a lioness stalking the leopard. And the cub was totally oblivious, and the lioness got within about 10 meters of him, and she was about to pounce. He was totally oblivious, just playing around in the sand and the drainage line. And Renius Mhlongo picked a stick out of a tree next to which he was sitting. He was sitting in a vehicle like I am. And he stood up and he flung it at the lioness's head. And I mean, a lioness is a tremendously powerful animal, so I mean, she would hardly have noticed it other than the shock it gave her as it bounced off her skull. He shouted the universal South African shout of "go away," which is "Fuck!" And the lioness went off, and the leopard survived into adulthood. So, Ellen, absolutely, we do have those instincts. We try as far as possible to let nature take its course, but I have to confess to you that if I saw little Sindile's demise about to happen, I would be sorely tempted to intervene. But the official word on it, Ellen, is that I wouldn't intervene at all. Just going to nip across to Scott quickly. He's got some lovely nyalas to show you, and we'll reposition in the interim and see you just now.
Welcome back, everyone. And sadly, this little family of nyala that we were hoping to show you have very speedily disappeared off into some quite thick bush. But there's one last one that's going to pop into view now from the right, and aren't they such beautiful little antelope? You can hear a francolin making a real racket in the background there. That's a crested francolin. And it sounds like it's having a dispute with another francolin further off to the west. So you may have heard another similar call, but not as loudly. And now that's another one actually behind us to the east. So the francolin are having a bit of a catch-up this morning. Oh, I just swallowed a fly. But I think I've recovered. No, all good. That wasn't very pleasant. Anyway, occasionally from time to time you swallow flies out here. Apparently they're good for you, good bacteria, they tell me. But always a bit of a fright when it happens. We're going to continue now. We're still searching for the Nkuhuma Pride. They're full-bellied. They've been feeding on a buffalo kill that they've made, but they were chased off it either by one of the Birmingham males or one of the Six males. There's a bit of dispute as to who it could be. We sadly have yet to get there, so we can't have our opinion on the matter, but there's various people. Some believe it's one of the Birmingham males and others believe that it's one of the Six males. Isn't it incredible that one single lion can chase off 8? Anyway, as I was saying, they are full-bellied, because even though he chased them off, they did return and manage to feed for a little bit last night before again being chased off, and it was probably on that occasion that they've all come now further south into Juma. So they didn't come to Buffalo's Hook Dam to drink, although they were very close to it. So they'd obviously drunk in Buffalo's Hook and were no longer thirsty, and I'm guessing are lying somewhere comfortable digesting their meal. So what my plan is, we've circled all of the blocks or the roads that encompass the block where they headed into. No sign of the tracks coming out of that area, which means they must be somewhere in the middle. It's a big block on our right hand side, but the plan is now to go back to the last tracks and then head off on foot. So we'll have a quick look at Buffalo's Hook Dam though before I leave you to go walking for these lion, and I'm hoping that possibly Bob, the resident hippo at Buffalo's Hook Dam, has returned. We're a little bit concerned because we did see 2 big bull hippos fighting late last night, and one of them could have been Bob, and the fact that there's no hippo here today and there usually is one makes us think that he could be in a bit of trouble. It's important to say though in the same breath that animals are back. Apologies for the breakages and signal there. It's obviously because of Brian's long hair interfering with the radio waves. No sign of the hippo here. We will give you a brief glimpse of the waterhole. You may notice some humanoids on the other side of the dam. They're enjoying a morning cup of coffee, and it's not uncommon to stop on both morning and evening drives to stretch your legs, have something to drink, and it's something that I would also suggest for you to do, just to get up, go for a little bit of a walk around, and keep the TV or computer in sight, but it is good to stretch the legs if you've been sitting for a while. Well, Edward would like to know if there is any way of knowing who exactly Bob is, and I personally don't feel remotely confident to be able to distinguish him from another hippo. The tricky things with hippos is they all look very similar, and most of the time all that we can see is their nostrils and eyes and ears poking out of the water. So we don't get to see characteristic cuts or scars on their bodies because they're out at night feeding and we don't get to see that. So the two hippo that I saw last night, it would be impossible for me to tell whether one of them was Bob. Bearing in mind it was also quite thick bush where they were, and we didn't want to get too close to them. Fighting hippo are something that you do not want to get caught in between. So I'm not too sure about that, but good question though, Ed, because will we ever know exactly who Bob is? That is the question, I guess, and I certainly won't. But I guess from behavior we can read into a lot of things and habits. If we did see a very wounded hippo come back to this waterhole in the next few days, it's safe to assume that it would be Bob, and that it was Bob who was in that fight. So we're going to continue now and head off to the last position of these lion tracks. And then I'll get a chance to stretch my legs like I've just suggested for you. Okay, well, we are very close to where I found the lion tracks crossing from left to right over this road in the southerly direction. Like I've said, we've encompassed this whole block to the right, and there was no sign of tracks crossing that road, Quarry Pan Road. So I'm hoping after a short walk we'll be able to find out where they are. But while I do that, why don't you head on back to James with Sindile, and we will see you all a little bit later, hopefully with the Nkuhuma Pride.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Jiga. We greet you with the news that young Sindile has done absolutely nothing since you were last here. He's just lying there, gently cleaning sort of bits of dust off his feet, but otherwise he's not doing anything at all, which is quite nice for him, I suppose. There he's up. Hello, John in Los Angeles. An interesting question. Have I ever seen a leopard without any florets? I'm assuming you mean basically a spotless leopard. John, I haven't, and I've certainly never even heard of one. I'd be fascinated to know where that question comes from and if you've seen something like that. I'm just going to be a little bit quiet while all of these vehicles are moving around the place. They're just two other game drives have come into the sighting and they're just trying to have a look. We are in prime position. Hello, Sandra. Sandra, you raise a very important issue. You're worried about the effect that the game drives have, and you emphasize not particularly this one because we're obviously not moving around, but at others that you've seen, where the Land Rovers are driving around, 3 Land Rovers driving around behind a leopard, and perhaps disturbing their ability to hunt, and perhaps affecting their ability to hear what's going on and smell what's going on. Sandra, there's no doubt we definitely have an effect. Is it a negative effect? I would say, given the amount of the number of leopards that there are in this area, I would say no, it isn't. So on balance, I don't think that it makes it a huge difference. That said, it is hugely important that we are very cognizant of what the behavior is doing. So if this leopard was on this stalk, for example, and, obviously trying to stalk something, to be driving around behind it, crunching over bushes, would be ridiculous. It would be a really bad idea. I've seen it happen. In general, though, because for example, guests always want to see, or often want to see a kill. What they will do is, what that does is that it makes rangers a lot more sensitive than they might be otherwise. So most of the guests that we get out here are they're pretty astute people. They wouldn't be out here if they weren't pretty well educated, like most of you who watch here. You can see when there's a sensitivity issue. You can see by the animal's behavior if it's moving away from you and looking and then scuttling off. So by judging animals' behavior, Sandra, we can basically tell if we're having an effect. And then just by using your nous, you can tell if you're having an effect on a hunt. So there's a balance. There's no question that sometimes we make mistakes. I made a mistake the other day with Sindile. I got too close to him when there were two other vehicles around, and he didn't run away at all, but he just got up and moved. And it was an important lesson to me that we must constantly be very aware of the sensitivities of the sighting. So thank you, Sandra, for that question. It's an important issue, and there's no firm answer to what is sensitive and what isn't sensitive, but we try always to err on the side of caution when it comes to especially young leopards like this. Hello, Jake and Kylene. You want to know if any of the animals in the area being tagged so that we can more easily identify them. Jake and Kylene, no, they haven't. We try and keep this as wild a system as possible. The only kind of tagging that may take place sometimes, and there's nothing in the area at the moment, would be the collaring of some of the animals so that researchers can keep a sort of GPS lock on where they are. Otherwise, no, there's no tagging, and especially not for identification. I mean, you have only to watch a couple of these game drives to find out how many different sort of differentiating marks a leopard like this has, and how many people, around the world now these days, can identify the leopards just from their spots. So if you there's a Facebook page called the Leopards of the Sabi Sands. There are photographs there just about all the leopards in the area, and you can see the unique spot patterns that they have around their faces, especially just above the whiskers, and so there's no need to tag them really. Ooh, Dee. How many leopards are there in the reserve? Okay, so Dee, we do a rough calculation. I know for sure that there are at least 6 or 7 territorial males in the area. You can multiply that number by 3 to get the number of territorial females in the Sabi Sands. So say 21-ish plus 7 is, we're sitting at 28. Then there'll be a number of nomadic leopards, young males who haven't found territory yet, and cubs and that sort of thing. You can probably double that. I would say at least 60 individual leopards knocking about in the Sabi Sands. Some of them won't be identified, but because of the number of game drives going around all the time, a lot of them will be. So, I would say upward of 60 leopards in this area. So an area of 60,000 hectares, which is about 140,000 hectares. No, a bit more than that, 160,000 acres. So 60,000 hectares. Probably 60 leopards including cubs, 60 to 70 leopards including cubs. That would be my guess. Impossible to know exactly, but you can get a pretty good guess in this area. Hello, Gabby in Johannesburg. Nice question. You want to know basically, is he as big as his grandmother or his mother yet? I'd say it's almost there. I'd say he's probably about a few weeks off being the same size as his mum and Karula. Karula's a good sized female, so I don't think he's as big as that yet. Shadow, I haven't seen very often, but I think probably a bit smaller. So my guess would be that he's He's probably approaching their size by now. Not quite there yet, but I'd say in a month or so, definitely. He's as tall, but bigger. If he makes it to sort of 4 or 5 years, he will almost double in size. Isn't it such a privilege to be able to sit with an animal for this length of time and not have to leave? It's wonderful. Lisa, nice question. You want to know vaguely when he might mate again? Not him. Let me start that again. You want to know when his mother might mate again? Lisa, the answer is as soon as he's sort of gone. The sort of normal would be once she's had a cub, 2 to 3 years afterwards. So 2.5 years, maybe she'll start mating again and she'll breed again. If she loses the cub, though, she'll breed again within a few weeks. Yeah, so it just depends on whether he hangs around. If he hangs around now and goes independent, say, in about a year, she'll probably look to mate fairly soon after that. So having a youngster around will stop her going into estrus. As soon as she loses that youngster, be it to a death or, if it goes away and sets up territory somewhere else, she'll come into estrus almost immediately. And he's now settling in for a typical cat day of doing just about nothing. The temperature hasn't warmed up much. It hasn't got much hotter at all. It's probably still about, about 15, 16 degrees. And he's kind of snuggled up in there, just underneath a warming bush or so. It'd be quite nice to have him on my lap, but I don't think he's going to come over. Hello, Jake and Kylene. You want to know, I'm laughing because a private car just came speeding past and then got a big shock when they saw a camera and a leopard in the picture. You want to know how, given the temperature here, how do leopards manage to cool down in the heat? Jake and Kylene, they do a number of ways. They lie in the shade. They're sort of obvious things. They drink more. And they're active at night. So they seldom move around on a very hot day, and so they are managed to sort of thermoregulate by being active at the right times. Same as, say, if you were in the desert, you might choose to be active at night rather than during the day. And that's basically how they do it. It gets to about, on a really, really hot day, 44 degrees Celsius here, which is probably about 108 degrees Fahrenheit. And they won't knock about too much during the heat of the midday. But yeah, so shade, water, active at night, and they do pant a bit. I don't think it is necessarily very good for cooling down. Terry in Santa Ana, you want to know, can leopards get TB like lions can? Terry, there is definitely some research that shows they can. They're certainly not immune to it. But remember that the TB comes largely from the bovids, like the buffalo or the kudu. Kudu can get it, but I think less than the buffalo do. And leopards don't really kill buffalo. They're not big enough. So they might get TB from a buffalo carcass if they were eating carrion, but because they don't hang around in prides, the chances of them passing it on to each other are that much smaller. So I don't think they're immune to it by any effect, but it doesn't seem to be causing any effect with the leopard populations. Right, it would seem that my erstwhile colleague Scott Dyson has managed to find some other cats. So we're going to cross it over to him, and I will see you in a little while. Well done, Scott. He's been after them all day.
Well, we've got very lucky, everyone, and thankfully I didn't have to walk too far before I stumbled upon the Nkuhuma Pride, so take a closer look. As you can see, they are all fast asleep, and thankfully, due to these windy conditions, they didn't even hear me. I was probably around 25 meters away from them when I saw them, and they didn't even raise a head. So that's always the best way to approach animals on foot. It's the ideal. It can't always happen, but if you can see them and move back to a vehicle without them actually knowing you're here, it's the first prize. They're not as full-bellied as I expected them to be, and I guess that just goes to show there's only so much you can read into the messages you get over the radio waves, but they certainly are content. Their bellies are, you could say, half full, and haven't we just been so lucky over the last week? We've had non-stop incredible big cat sightings, and this morning is no different. James and Sindile, and now us with the Nkuhuma Pride. There's 8 lying here in total. It's difficult to see all of them now because they are lying in such thick bush, but possibly a little bit later we can try and reposition. There are already another 2 vehicles in the sighting with us, Aubrey and Craig, so we don't want to move around too much and disturb these lions. The individual you can see in the center of your screen now, you'll notice has a bit of a mane protruding from his neck, and he's a young male. He's, I think, approaching about 4 years of age now, 3.5 to 4 years of age, and he's still quite lucky to be with this pride. It's surprising that his fathers have yet to kick him out of town, and the reason why they need to do that is to prevent him mating with his mothers or sisters. So his days with this pride are numbered. He has, about 3 weeks ago, his fathers did come across him and the rest of the pride, and it was believed that they chased him away, and he was seen about 2 miles away from the pride, but then slowly made his way back and rejoined with them. And he will continue to try and stay with this pride until he realizes that his fathers will give him a serious beating if he doesn't listen to them, and that stage is imminent. For now though, he's got nothing to worry about, and as you can see, he's enjoying this cool weather. Perfect weather for lions to relax and digest their buffalo that was unfortunately stolen from them by one single male. I did mention earlier we're not sure which male it is that chased them off. It's either one of the Styx males or one of the Birmingham males. And that in itself is an incredible fact to think about. One single lion yet to actually get into his prime, so it wasn't a monster big male lion that chased them off. Managed to scare off all 8 of them. They did return and feed on the carcass a bit more after having been chased off initially, but then last night we were reported that again the male came back and scared them off, and this is where they found themselves now.
For him it's going to be very difficult because he's going to have to go around by himself, try survive.
Great prospects for the sunset safari this afternoon though, because these lions are on the property fairly close to Buffelshoek Waterhole, and they could very well go there and drink for us a little bit later, so you should certainly think about tuning into the sunset safari already, and who knows what may happen. Even though their stomachs are fairly full, if they get an opportunity to hunt, they certainly won't miss that up. Okay, what's interesting, we just got a question through from D, and D's noticed that this young male's mane is not very big, and that's correct, but it's difficult to associate the size of a lion's mane directly with its age. It can be misleading, and you can get some rather larger, older males whose manes have yet to develop as much as younger males than them. So it's not a sure way of determining the age of a lion, but this guy's about 3.5 or 4 years of age, so kind of in the general spectrum. He's not behind, he's not ahead, he's sitting fairly regular with regards to mane growth and age. With mane growth, a lot of it is often attributed to the status of male lions, and if and when they come into dominance, I'm told that their mane can grow exceptionally in that stage, and I guess all the hormones and testosterone pumping through their body when they do become dominant and are mating with females may increase mane growth fairly drastically. Well, it sounds like Sindile is busy performing, so we're going to cut across to Sindile and we will see you all a bit later.
Hello everybody, welcome back to little Sindile. He's such a sweet little fellow lying here in the bushes as he is, very relaxed, very chilled out, I think is the expression to use. He's not going anywhere, I don't think, for the next little while. We're going to probably spend another few minutes with him, and then I want to go and check the hyena den and just see if that real little cub is there. In fact, sorry, Scott, in fact, is going to go to the hyena den, not us. So we will stay here with magnificent little Sindile. The communications here are very difficult because there's a slight delay between Jiga and the final control. So what you're hearing from me is actually 8 seconds after I've said it. So basically we're living in the future. So Scott will go, just to confirm, Scott will go to look to see if the little hyena cub is there. And we will remain here with magnificent little Sindile. Now I just want you to get an impression of the atmosphere around here at the moment. So I'm just going to be quiet for the next 10 seconds. So I'm sure all you could hear there was the wind blowing gently and perhaps a starling calling off to the west. And it's such an atmospheric day with these clouds. And there's the odd bit of blue sky sort of disappearing as the clouds scud past on the southerly breeze. Such an atmospheric day, and just made all the more wonderful by this little fellow lying, warming himself, curled up like a house cat there where you can see him. Hello, Debbie. An interesting question. Thank you for it. Yeah, it's a good one. Do the leopards stop? Do they go into estrus when their cubs stop nursing or suckling? I think pretty much like the primates do. No, Debbie, they don't. I think there's another trigger, and that trigger is basically the independence of the cub. I think its presence around the mother for extended periods. Remember, they wean. He's fully weaned now. They wean fully by 6 months. Maybe some of them will go a bit longer than that, but basically he's fully weaned now, and she definitely won't come into estrus if he's still around. It was unlikely that she'll come into estrus if he's still around until he's probably about 2 to 2.5 years. So yeah, I think it's unlikely. So for a nice example of it, for example, is Karula, who's an 11-year-old female. She's got 2 young sons who are now 2.5 and she's just been seen mating. Well, she was seen mating about 2 months ago. She might be pregnant. So that's basically their independence is the trigger. I'm sure there must be a hormonal reason for it. Hello, Ellen in Arkansas again. Nice question. You want to know? You think he might be hanging around the road a bit like a dog might, who likes to chase wheels. Ellen, I don't think that's the case. No, you make mention of lions chasing wheels. I've seen that once before, and it's a fairly terrifying thing when a 180 kilogram cat comes charging after the wheels of your car. But he doesn't show any interest with the wheels when we drive past. They do tend to look, for example, Chandra kind of sticks out on the back of this car, largely because he's not a small man, but also because he's kind of exposed on this filming platform where he is. And so that's what they look at when we come up. They don't tend to be attracted to the sight of the wheels at all. So I don't think he's hanging around a road because he enjoys cars. I think he's simply hanging around the road because this is where his mother's sort of centralizing her activities at the moment. So that's why he's around this particular road. Yeah, I've never seen him look at a wheel. He definitely gave Gendre the hairy eyeball though, as we drove in here. Right. Anna Marie, let's get the spot pattern on him. You say you can see 3. I can see 3 on the side he's just put down into the ground. And Anna Marie, which side did you see 3 on? I saw 3 on his left. I think there are also 3 on his right. So I think he's probably a 3-3 male. He'll definitely put his head up again just now. And by just now, I mean the South African just now, which means in a little while, not now, which is what just now means in the rest of the world, of course. So for those of you who are perhaps new to the identification of leopards, the best way to do it is, in the absence of very obvious features, like, say, a mauled ear or a gammy eye, something like that. The best way to do it is the spot pattern above the whiskers, and the spot pattern above his whiskers is 3. I managed to get the sight of 3 spots on the left-hand side of his face, and I think on the right-hand side of his face, this is his right, not mine, I think that it's also 3. So I think he's 3-3. So that's how you'd refer to the males, or to the leopards. And certainly before, where I used to work, we didn't used to name them by name, so this little fellow's called Sindile, but we'd often call them by their spot patterns. So we had the 3-4 female, which means she had 3 on one side and 4 on the other. Yeah, there's definitely 3 on his left. He's in rather perfect condition. Hello, Patty in Olympic Forest in Washington State. Sounds like a fairly wet place you live. I hope there's a bit of sun shining wherever you are. Patty, you ask an interesting question, and we've had it, interestingly, a few times, in various ways in the last few days. And you want to know if it's basically a question on menopause, on animal menopause. Do leopards and lions and hyenas go into a menopause? No, they don't. They will die. I mean, they might live a couple of months after they're unable to breed, and in captivity that might happen for longer. But out here, they pretty much, once they stop breeding, they will die. And they don't die because they stop breeding. They stop breeding. The main reason that animals do have a period of menopause is because it's only in animals in which there is a usefulness to elders. So in elephants is a good example, and in human beings is the best example, where our elders hold an important place in society because they're repositories of knowledge. Grandmothers know that, you know, where they're needed to teach, especially in Stone Age societies. They were needed to teach and grandfathers are needed to teach the youngsters about life and where they're going and what to do and all of that sort of thing. And with elephants, it's the same sort of thing. So as the matriarchs will often live beyond breeding age and stop breeding and continue to teach where what the right plants to eat are, I think, although that hasn't been recorded, I suspect it's quite a strong possibility. You don't find that menopause occurs, which is quite interesting. So this leopard will learn very little from his mother. She won't teach him to hunt. He does that almost entirely on instinct. Cheetahs, they do teach their cubs, but of course by the time that they go independent, that's the last time the mothers will do anything with them, and so they don't have that need for a sort of menopausal teaching thing. It's very interesting. In human beings as well, of course, one of the reasons that females go into menopause, I suppose, relatively early compared with the lifespan of human beings, is that it's very dangerous. Birth is very dangerous for human beings, especially in the absence of any medical care. And so the sooner that sort of process is over, the safer it is for sort of more brittle bones, if you like. Romay, a nice question. Would Sindile survive if his mother never returned? Romay, I would say his chances would be very small. Not impossible, but very small. If he was in a reserve, say, where he was the only leopard, and there were no lions and hyenas about, I'd say his chance would be pretty good, because he can kill francolins and kill scrub hares, and he can basically find enough for himself to eat. But here, without the protection of his mother, and with a number of territorial males around, and certainly nomadic males, remember quarantine and Nkuhuma are still in and around about this area, he would be in trouble. He's not big enough to defend himself yet. He's almost the size of an adult female, but he's certainly nothing like the size needed to defend himself against an adult male or even a sub-adult male. And as I keep emphasizing these days, that's his major threat. His major threat is not lions and hyenas. He can get away from them. But other leopards, bigger, stronger leopards will be an issue for him. So Marianne Georgianne has that's quite nice. Marianne Georgianne has confirmed that he is indeed 3'3". So we now know that Sindile is 3'3". That's 3 spots on the left above his whiskers and 3 spots on the right above the whiskers, and that's how he will be identified henceforth. Unless, unlike his grandmother, she's got a. It took me a while to see it, I must say. A number of you got a little bit irate with me that I couldn't see the "wow" written across the front of Karula's forehead. But once you know it's there, it's very obvious. And you know, he might have some similar sort of patterning above his, between his eyes. That might also be a nice way to identify him. His grandmother has a very distinct "wow" written across her forehead. It is amazing. Do they get a thicker coat of hair? I was just thinking exactly that thing. I was just thinking exactly that just now, as I was looking at him through my powerful binoculars. He looks to be quite fluffy, and I don't know if, I think that's probably a function of his age rather than the fact that they get thick. Sorry. We're just going to quickly nip across to Scott, who's got some saddle-bill stalks. Basically, yes, slight thickening of winter coat, but not much. So we just link across to Scott, and we'll see you now.
Welcome back, everyone, and sorry about the confusion earlier, and also sorry that we left the Nkuhuma Pride before you could say goodbye, but it did seem like the right decision at the time, because maybe Shadow will come back and join Sindile, or something may happen there, but the likelihood of something happening with those sleepy lion is not looking promising. And look where it's brought us on the way to the hyena den site. We're at the Juma Dam, and there's a beautiful female saddle-billed stork busy hunting. You'll see her probing her beak into the water there, hoping to latch onto fish or frogs. And the good news for her is that the fish's escape routes are becoming fewer and further between as this water begins to really get quite shallow. And there's an Egyptian goose in the background that's just swum into the top end of the dam. The Egyptian goose is not an aquatic hunter. It feeds on vegetation and grass. So it will just be here looking for some algae, aquatic plant life rather, whereas the saddle-billed stork is highly carnivorous. And I'm very tempted to spend a few more minutes here and see if we can't see one making a kill. Oh, look at all the fish there. Did you see all those ripples? It would be awesome if we saw it latch onto a fish of any size. But there's some fairly decent sized fish in here, and it's always an interesting struggle to watch when a stork or a heron catches a fish that's too big for it to swallow. Just had an update on the radio. I just want to chat with Craig, but keep watching. Don't take your eyes off the screen, because it could catch something at any moment, and it's really a quick motion. Craig, what's the lock of that sighting? Okay, copy, thanks very much. Okay, well, some interesting info I've just received over the radio that I'd like to share with you. The zebra carcass that Mvula started feeding on early last night has been fed on by hyena over the course of the evening, but now evidently no hyena there, and Mvula's back on the scene, so he's now continuing to feed on this adult zebra that died of unknown causes. He was the first to feed on it last night. Then I'm told lots of hyena were around it earlier this morning, and lots of sign of hyena in that area, and also a huge amount of the carcass had been consumed. So it's fair to assume that it was the hyena that consumed all of that meat. It would have been impossible for Mvula to do that. But now he's back there feeding on some scraps. It's sadly just north of our northern boundary, but he could return to us once he's full-bellied with some zebra. Well, the stork looks like it's stopped its morning fishing. So we will now continue towards the hyena den sites in the hope that we'll get to see the tiny new little cub that James saw for the first time yesterday morning. So really great news. There's a new addition to the Nkuhuma hyena clan, and it really is small and cute from the highlights that I've seen of it. I've yet to lay eyes on it myself, and we're hoping that they're going to be out and about this morning. We're only a few minutes away from there. And I believe a lot of you have been urging us to head to the hyena den site, so we have listened to your calls and we are on our way there. Kevin is one of those viewers and a whole list of others. Oh, little yellow-billed hornbill. We're only a few hundred meters away from the final control room where Tara and Nikki are sitting off to our right. And I'm going a bit quickly, but they're over there somewhere. You may see a radio antenna sticking up out of the trees on the right of the screen, and that's a very important piece of equipment in getting the broadcast to you. And they're just below that. Then on our left-hand side is where some of the crews stay at the moment. You can't really see it, but it's in there. And just to let you know a little bit about where we stay and in the proximity we are to the Nkuhuma waterhole, where there's that live 24-hour-a-day feed. Well, hello Kathleen, and she's interested to know what time of year will saddle-billed storks and Egyptian geese nest. The two birds that we've just seen at the waterhole. Sure, the wind has really picked up here, but we are on a bit of a crest, so it should hopefully subside as we get a bit lower. Egyptian geese will nest in the summer months, November, December, Kathy, and they nest up in trees in quite rudimentarily made platforms of twigs. Interestingly, the young chicks, when they hatch, do not have the ability to fly and need to immediately start feeding themselves. They don't get fed beak to beak by their mother. They feed alongside their mothers from the day they're born. Now, the interesting thing about it is, like I said, they cannot fly, but the nest is elevated up in a tree, so they have to just jump out in the hope that they'll survive the crash landing below. But their bones and bodies, I guess, are very robust and designed to be able to take that initial thud when they hit the earth for the first time. And wouldn't that be incredible to view? Storks, I'm not too sure, but I'm going to double check for you, Kathleen, when we get into the hyena sighting. I've never actually seen saddle-billed storks nesting. They're quite rare birds to see, actually, and unless there's residents in your area, like we have the two residents that we see, you may not see them for many kilometers. So we're fortunate with the fact that there are some saddle-billed stork around, but I've never actually seen them nest, and I'm not sure what time of the year, but I'm guessing it would also be summer. The majority of birds will nest in the more plentiful summer months. Well, we do have a really interesting fact thanks to Katrina on saddle-billed storks, Kathy, and that is that they can live up to 36 years of age. Now, there's a loud noise you're going to hear coming from this little structure on my right, and we're very close to the hyena den site, so I'm just going to run off and turn off that water pump. That's how we get the water in our camp. Okay. Sorry about that, but it would certainly have been unpleasant if we were at the hyena den site with this loud water pump banging away. And just to explain a little bit more about that water pump, there's basically a borehole that pumps water, pumps water up the borehole and about half a mile to the house that I pointed out where we stayed. And it fills up a 10,000 litre reservoir tank that we basically need to fill almost on a daily basis, keep it topped up. Even though we don't go through 10,000 litres a day, we do turn on the water pump daily. Now this is the road to the hyena den, and in the next few seconds we will know whether we're in luck with seeing this little cub or not, or whether there's even any adults here. There could be no one home. Katrina, a huge thanks for that fact that you sent through to us on the saddle-build staged AUK. And we've got another question from Edward also about the saddle-build stork. He's interested to know whether it can see through the water. It certainly can't. It's just too thick. So like you said, Edward, it will be focusing on the ripples, but it will also be using its feet. They use their feet as detectors of movements every time they move forward, and this will help them to know if a fish is surging forward, they can stab kind of in the direction of that movement. So they will use their feet to help detect prey. Uh-oh, things aren't looking very promising here. And the hyena den looks unoccupied. Now the reason for that is probably because these hyena have got wind of that zebra that they'll be busy feeding on. Even though Mvula is feeding on it at the moment, they'll take turns, I guess, because there's only so much they can squeeze into their belly at any given moment. But they probably will wait there in order to maximize the opportunity before moving back to the den. So that's where they could be. It is just a speculation. They could have found another kill elsewhere. Anyway, the burrows that Brian just zoomed into is where the cub lives. I believe it came out of the right-hand burrow, and Brian was here to see it pop out for the first time. It must have been a really exciting event. They had no idea it was in there, and Brian said he was busy zooming out of the shots about to go into another hyena when he saw this little black fur ball pop into screen, and he excitedly recorrected and readjusted his plans. And that was just yesterday morning, so it's probably around, I think, 2 weeks of age, and I think James agrees with that. At a rough age, it's very difficult to be accurate to the day when it comes to aging them, but probably only 2 weeks old, and it's a tiny little black fur ball. And it's not the only cub. There's also a few older cubs that are probably 6 or 7 months old now, maybe even a bit older than that actually, that we've seen grow up from the beginning of our broadcast that started here in November last year. And it's really interesting, a question that's just come through as to, do I think it's possible for the younger cubs, there's 3 of them that are 7 months, 8 months old now, is it possible that they've also headed to that zebra carcass? And there is a small chance that they have started moving with the clan. I know one of the cubs has been seen following the clan to a leopard kill. It was Tingana who had made a kill just west of our property in Sibambili, and Brent saw this young little cub there, and it's surprisingly young to already be moving with the clan. But that's the interesting thing about nature. Even though the textbooks and general rules will often apply, there's always these random outliers that keep us guessing, and usually they'll only start moving at around 9 months of age to a year, and this one seems a little bit younger than that. So It is possible though. It would be interesting to chat with the other guides and see if they've seen any sign of those smaller hyena at that zebra carcass. And a little bit more on hyena and cubs and kind of when they typically start eating meat. At around 6 months of age, they'll start getting weaned off their milk, so they'll therefore be required to feed on more meaty substances. And yes, the mothers will bring back meat to the den sites, although it's not hugely common for hyena to do that. So it's an uncommon occurrence to see large pieces of meat getting brought back to the den sites. And I guess there's good reason for that. If they kept dragging kills back to the den, it would attract a host of other carnivores and predators into that area, straight to their cubs. So the tiny young cub that's just been born is going to be solely reliant on milk for its first 3 or 4 months of life, and then from around 6 months they'll start getting weaned, and then they'll rely on little bits and pieces and bones that get brought back by their mothers. Okay, so where to go now is the next question. Let me just get an update on the Game Drive channel quickly. I've had that volume turned down. Stations, any updates please? Copy, thanks Orbs. Okay, well, according to our friend Aubrey, one of the Juma guides, he says there are no updates. So I think the plan should be is that we need to find something worth calling in and give everyone a nice update to finish off their morning safari. So my initial plan was to head right, but then I just got a gut feeling to go left down towards the treehouse waterhole now to see what's going on there. Okay, we've got a question through from Morning Glory on the lion dynamics and what she thinks would happen if, well, due to the fact that the Matimba males are spending more time with the Styx females and their 3 little cubs, would that prolong Junior's time being allowed to stay with the Nkuhuma Pride? I don't think it will have a direct impact on that, Morning Glory. I think they're going to move, they're not constantly with those females. I believe they are mating with one of them now. So the one female gave birth, and I think yesterday afternoon, I stand to be corrected, but one of the Matimba males, both of them were there, but one of them was mating with, I think, the other 6 females. So in 3 months' time, we could have a few more cubs, which is great news. But this mating will only last for 3 to 5 days. And then they'll probably start checking their territory again, patrolling their boundaries, and bump into the Nkuhuma Pride, which again, when that happens, they could force off Junior. So it may be buying him a few days, but it's not going to have a huge impact on how long they tolerate him. Okay, some zebra up ahead here, which is great. But while we get into position, I'm going to answer a question from Selfie J. Good morning and good to have you with us. Selfie J would like to know, what is my favorite part about this job? Now, there's a number of things, Selfie J, but naturally you would understand that I love the bush and have worked here ever since I graduated from university, so it's always been a plan to live a life spent in the bush. And the fact that here we are on safari with not just 6 guests on the back of our vehicle as I would normally be, but thousands of you all joining in, interacting and enjoying Africa, even though it is from abroad. So that for me is a huge reason why I'm currently loving working on Safari Live, and I hope you're enjoying the product as much as we're enjoying getting it out to you, because it really is so much fun, such a unique concept that we're all a part of, and I feel that it could take us to many other wilderness destinations, and I hope it does that. So that's something I look forward to in the future. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this brief view of the zebra, but we're going to send you back to James now. There's just a few minutes left of the morning broadcast, and I think it'll be great for you to be able to spend a bit more time with Sindile, that beautiful young male leopard. I'm jealous of the morning you've spent with him, but that it is what it is, and maybe we'll get lucky this afternoon with the Nkuhuma Pride. We'll see you later.
Everybody, you find me slightly flustered. There is a honeysucker just behind us. Honeysucker, in case you don't know, is a large truck that is going to basically empty a sewage tank, which is very unsightly. Come on, my man, off you go. So I'm going to hold my nose as he goes past. That is appalling timing on his part. He just arrived as Tara cut to us. So, sorry about that. The smell of sewage does hang slightly in the air, but hopefully with this breeze it will dissipate shortly. Gendre, he was feeling a little ill yesterday, has just turned green. Never mind. He will stoically continue to film little Sindile while we sit here. So we're just going to spend the last few minutes watching this wonderful little leopard. He's very tired. He's had an exhausting day. Hello, Bugsy. Bugsy, you want to know, you've managed to remain serious about this sighting. I thank you for that. And with the strange occurrence that just occurred, you want to know at what stage do they start marking territory. Bugsy, this leopard won't mark territory until he's at least 2.5 to 3 years old. They will a little bit before that, but they won't start actively defending a territory probably until they're about 4 or 5. But I've seen young males, not this age, but young males sort of 2.5 years old, they will sort of start to try and mark territory. But as soon as they attract the attention to the territorial male of the area, they will very quickly stop doing that, because the last thing that they want to see is the territorial male of an area. Nice question about when is the best time to go on safari. From Pittsburgh, Jen, there's no best time to go on safari. It just depends on what you like, and each different time of the year offers different things. So let's start from now. You can see that the bush is pretty clear. There are no thick leaves, and that makes game viewing quite a bit easier. It's not very cold this time of the year, but it is colder than it is in summer, but it's certainly not too cold to go on game drive. And the water's quite concentrated, which means that the animals tend to concentrate around the water, so the game viewing can be a little bit easier at this time of the year. But, so if we move into spring, say September to November time, the bush is still clear. There's always the chance of rain, which is quite nice actually out here. Doesn't tend to be a hindrance. It can be a bit windy that time of year, but the bush is very clear. The water's super concentrated, so that's, it's not a bad time. Then the summer months are always just beautiful. The game viewing perhaps not quite as strong because the bush is thicker and the water isn't concentrated, but it's just so stunning out here. So you see it all verdant and green. So any time of the year, really, probably the best game viewing time. So, Selfie J, I believe you asked Scott the same question. What is the favorite part of my job? It's difficult to say. I think the reason I live out here, the reason I do what I do, is that I really enjoy living in a beautiful place. So for me, sitting with an animal like this and spending an extended period with it, just absorbing the atmosphere around here, the different smells and the different sounds and the different tastes, those are the reasons that I come out here. When I'm on my own in the bush, I don't do a huge amount of tracking. I do a lot of walking and just being in the wild. And it's the sense of peace that the wilderness gives me that draws me out here. And I love conveying that through the medium of this camera with genre behind it. I really enjoy taking or trying to give that sense of atmosphere and peace to those of you who are very kind enough to watch us. Thank you for your questions today. We're probably going to leave this fellow now and head back home for a little bit of a bite to eat. Thanks very much to Nikki and Tara in the final control room. They do a rather marvelous job. They have thousands of different things that they have to do, so how their brains manage to do it, I'm not really sure. Thanks very much to Scott and to Brian on the other vehicle who've been driving around finding all sorts of interesting things. And thank you to Jean-Dre, who has been a fine partner this morning, although he has turned green on sight of that honeysucker. And thank you mostly, of course, to Sindile, who is lying there in the bush, rescued our game drive from the 1 duiker and 2 steenbok, and we're going to spend a little bit longer with him, and we'll see you this afternoon. Thank you again for your questions and your contributions. Please remember to join us later today, and tell your friends about us, please. Tell them to just stick it on WildSafariLive.com and tell them to send us questions and comments. We will see you later this afternoon. It's been a marvelous morning, very atmospheric. Just enjoy the last few seconds of this amazing atmosphere.